He'd just gotten off the phone when the young woman came into the office. Or rather, she was already in the office as he cradled the receiver and swiveled the chair around. He uttered a little cry. He hadn't heard her come in and believed the building to be all but deserted. She was gazing at him with luminous eyes, unnaturally lit by the slanting rays of the afternoon sun, which were just now penetrating the partially open blinds. "Hello?" she said, as his knee slammed into the corner of the metal desk. Something flashed before his eyes, and he thought he could see a series of patterns radiating from his knee, like the colored stars used to represent pain in a comic strip panel. He brought his hand up to his forehead. "Ouch?" The girl bobbed her head in a kind of shrug. "That sounded nasty." "Least of my problems," he said, folding up his laptop and sliding it into its case. As he leaned forward to unplug his cell phone charger from the power strip that ran along the side of the desk, he knocked something onto the floor. The young woman stooped to pick it up, a sign in a freestanding frame that read, "Professor Adams knows more than you do." "A student made this?" she asked, placing it up back on the desk. He turned an empty palm in her direction. "I have no idea." She came closer. "I need to talk to you about something," she said in a very different tone. And now that he was more or less forced to look directly at her, and also to confront the fact that, doing so left him excited and confused. Her eyes, which at first appeared a sort of amber brown, turned green as she leaned forward into the slanting light. She had one of those lush mouths he saw pictured on magazine covers. An abundance of dark brown hair tumbled across her shoulders, and the golden hues in her skin hinted at mixed ancestry, although exactly what sort of mix he couldn't say. Then there was the curve of the nose, that gentle upward sloping near its tip, which somehow mirrored the swell of the upper lip and the delicate groove of the Cupid's bow. "I'm sorry," he said when he realized that he was staring. She'd been talking for nearly a minute. He could hardly make sense of her words. Apparently she'd mistaken him for one of her professors. He was, after all, sitting in an office in the Humanities building, at a desk belonging to some member of the faculty, maybe a Professor Adams, who could say. It was merely one office in a row of 20 or so, each of which, he'd been given to understand, was shared by more than one instructor. The department secretary appeared in the doorway. "Oh, you're still here," she called to him over the young woman's shoulder. "That's fine. Just make sure the door locks when you go, okay?" She held her wrist up in a way that suggested she was checking her watch. "I didn't mean to bother you," the young woman said to him. "I mean, I know it's not your regular office hours, but I thought you might remember me." "I can safely say I've never seen you before," he said. He meant to deliver this statement in a wry tone, but his voice faltered at the critical moment, and it came out sounding like a lament. "I went to the first 2 classes, but then my mother got sick, and she lives a real long way away. And at the beginning, it was always me that had to be there Wednesday nights, because my brother said, that's not important, it's just that I kept thinking that the situation was going to change, because my brother said he was going to be there Tuesdays through Thursdays, so I could..." Why are you looking at me that way?" "Sorry." He shaded his eyes with his hand and shifted his gaze to his open date book, a week's worth of sales calls noted in red ink. "Okay, here's my situation," she went on. "I'm going to school on a kind of a trust fund." "Kind of a trust fund?" "I mean, it is a trust fund, set up by my grandfather before he died, but it won't pay for anything unless I take at least 12 units a semester and get at least a B+ average. So I didn't drop your class. Probably I should have. Probably I should tell you that you're wasting your time," he thought. But instead of saying this, he asked, "What did you say your name is?" She hung her head slightly. "Clement. Andrea. You can sit down if you want, Miss Clement." "Thanks," she whispered. He watched her sit down with a growing sense of wonder. He'd given her a directive, and she had followed it. No one had ever mistaken him for a professor before. It felt good. And a moment earlier, he'd been depressed. He got up and adjusted the blinds so that the sun was no longer in their faces. In the courtyard outside, a small tree stood in full bloom. The sight of it made him a little giddy. It had been a disappointing day, but he might have some fun with it yet. And now the end of the semester is upon us, he said slowly, employing a lugubrious tone to keep from laughing. And you want to trip off to your Memorial Day barbecue with a solid A in your back pocket, is that it? He kept his back to her as he spoke. The sternness of his voice sounded ridiculous, the affect of a bad TV actor. He felt his mouth spasm as he tried to control his laughter. Gesundheit, Miss Clement said. He hunched over as he suppressed another laugh, jostling the blinds. Thanks, he said after a moment. What the hell did he think he was doing? He turned in Miss Clement's direction, but found he could still only look at her obliquely in tiny glances, and had to rest his eyes on the door frame behind her. He wondered what they called this thing, this style of jacket she was removing. Black leather, little more than a vest, with all sorts of odd straps hanging from it. The image suggested combat, body armor. Underneath she had on a verdant green tank top, held up with the thinnest straps he'd ever seen, and which displayed her bare midriff, presented it as if on a platter of samples. Her navel, he couldn't help noticing, was pierced, something green. An emerald, perhaps, flashed up at him, like a tiny fish disappearing into the depths of a pond. She was telling him that she could make up the work over the summer. In the first 6 weeks, in fact, it would be like taking an incomplete. As she spoke, she turned her chair in his direction, tilting her body forward slightly as she did so, and lifting herself an inch or so off the seat to adjust her skirt. The lack of subtlety in the movement made him laugh out loud. He felt pleased that he'd managed to keep a straight face for as long as he had. But maybe now he'd taken the joke far enough. Okay, he said, I don't know how you other professors are handling this, but I think Professor Adams... It's not a joke, she said, looking down at the floor. I really need help. No doubt, it's just that... Maybe, she said, sighing heavily. I don't know. Maybe we could discuss it over dinner? I don't know that you really mean to. I mean, I think your professor... He stopped. He followed her gaze down to the scuffed tips of his mock-toe Oxfords as he tried to work out the full meaning of her statement. I'm pretty sure, she said, we could come to some sort of agreement. She looked up at him with her astonishing eyes. Her jaw slid forward in a determined way, but the vein in her neck was throbbing. He made a queer noise as he inhaled. He scanned the spaces of her unblemished forehead, as if hoping to read there the words he was to say next.